You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We are wrapping up the Happy Hobbies series today. I'm excited to share this one with you because neither Sarah nor I know what the hobby is for our guests. So this is kind of exciting. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Dr. Matthew C. Harrison, president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Pastor Harrison, welcome back to the Coffee Hour.
Always a pleasure. Nice to be with you.
This is a fun interview.
You think so?
No, I think so. Well, that's true.
We just started.
This has been a fun series.
I'm hopeful too.
This has been a fun series for us because it's been a little bit on the lighter side.
Yeah.
Well, a lot on the lighter side.
A lot on the lighter side.
Yeah, we need the lighter side.
Why do you say that? Why do we need the lighter side?
Well, there's so many contentious and very dire and challenging issues that swallow us up and surround us all the time that we, I think, because of the onslaught of media, like KFUO. No, just kidding. The constant onslaught of social media, that our lives can be so pressed, and we can press joy out of them and become very imbalanced. There are important things to be talking about, we all know, and right now, and we are talking about those things in their proper places. But we need a balanced life, and enjoying God's creation and creatures is part of that balance.
Speaking of balance, you carried some very large books into the studio today, and we're just dying to know, what is this hobby? We left it wide open. You could choose whatever hobby, and I know you have a few. So what's the hobby you've chosen to share with us today?
Well, I do have a few. I think I probably have obsessive compulsive disorder. That's probably my problem. Now, I get interested in a lot of different things and find great intrigue. I like old books. Old books just kind of find me, old theological books. I have a nice first volume of a whole set I have of Luther's writings. First volume published in 1555. The glorious picture of Luther and his Prince of Saxony kneeling at the cross of Christ with Christ on the crucifix. I have another book here, for instance, which I came across, which is a history book from the 19th century, and you see the signature there? That is Franz Pieper, the president of the Synod in the early 1900s, but also, along with C.F.W. Walther, president of the seminary for 90 years.
Wow.
And on the next page is Ferdinand Walther's signature, the founder of the Missouri Synod. Who gave this? I think, it's a Geschenk, gift from Walther. So I like old books. I like to translate books from time to time. I've worked on a number of translations over many years. Started right when I got into the parish. I love history and I'm a historian, and I got interested in the individual named Hermann Sasse and began as a young pastor translating every morning for, say, an hour. I'd get to the office quite early and carve that out, and that over time turned into a collection of 5 Sasse volumes now that we have put out, which helped teach me a whole lot, helped teach me to be patient. The history of the church is long, and the tenure of a pastorate is short. And so those are some of the things. Other things I've enjoyed, I like working with my hands. I built a cedar strip canoe. I've restored 2 other old wood canvas canoes, which has been delightful. I play banjo, little guitar, mandolin. I built banjos, guitars, and mandolins, and found that to be really a blessing. Wood is such a magnificent medium to work with. It's totally theological. It's a first article gift. I mean, wood, when you see its qualities of beauty and depth and strength and so many different kind of woods for different applications. It's a beautiful first article gift. It's forgiving, and it's hard to really, really screw things up. And what's really cool about it, it's just like life. The more twisted it is, the more difficult life it had, the more gnarled and diseased, the more beautiful it is as a final product. So it's really an extraordinary thing. And
Obviously not
God
seen
works
my
in our
woodwork.
lives. So, anyway, those are a few of my interests here and there.
So we could have like a 3-hour session right now. I was slightly hoping we would have a banjo jam session for this, not gonna lie. However, old books are also super cool. What got you into enjoying these old, huge historical books?
Well, theology, really. I got to the seminary. I had not studied. I was pretty strong in Greek by the time I had gotten to the seminary. I had good undergraduate education there, and also, so I started, of course, reading theology, reading the Greek New Testament, and just fell in love with theology and the surety of Lutheran theology and its simplicity and absolute certainty in Christ and his certain forgiveness delivered by word and sacrament. And then I discovered that there was a veritable mountain of literature in German and Latin that I had no access to. And that bothered me. So I taught myself to read German and just began largely by translating, and have done that for many years. I don't speak German that well, but certainly not, but I'm able to read it, most German, pretty well.
How did you teach yourself to read and translate German? Just
There's
books?
a little book called Introduction to Theological German by Manton, and it just starts you off by reading simple excerpts from the Bible. And then, so I started to just grab hold of books when they came in. You know, at the seminary's library, pastors leave their books, or one time I was talking to Harold Bowles, my dear, now deceased, long deceased seminary prof, and I was telling him how I had studied in Australia, and I found a full set of Lutheran German over there, the old St. Louis edition published by the Missouri Synod, and it had gotten lost in shipping. And he said, What? Come over to my office right now. Come over here. And here he takes me into his office, and this was not the Missouri Synod edition from 1900 or so. This was the original edition, the Valk 1 from about 1725. Whoa. All in this glorious kind of shiny white pigskin. And he said, Take it. I said, Dr. Bull, I don't think just take it. Just go. So he loaded me up with a couple of big boxes, and I threw it out in my old junk car. And so a lot of these treasures have wonderful connections to people, and I'll give them away someday too. They're just books. All of this will be sort of in the resurrection. It will be burned to nothing, and we'll have things far better to enjoy. But Lutheranism is unique in this area, somewhat unique, I think. There were many at the time of the Reformation who really thought that austerity was the way to make sure you were a Christian. Luther did not believe in that. He wrote famous things that scandalized people, like Christians should be a little bit tipsy once in a while, not drunk, but a Christian can enjoy. God gives wine for the joy of the soul. Drunkenness, alcoholism's a horrible thing. I know that, have had a lot of experience in those pastoral situations. But nevertheless, the Bible does not call it sin, and far from it. Jesus creates how many gallons? I'm not saying anybody's hobby should be alcohol, but a lot of people do have hobbies, collecting wine and tasting beer or making beer, and those things are just fine. Luther had a bowling alley put in his house downstairs for students, especially to enjoy, but I'm sure he played rounds himself. He particularly enjoyed fencing as entertainment. Lutherans approved of art, of musical instruments, of depictions of nature. Many of the Calvinists and opponents, if you go to Geneva, for instance, and check out the great cathedral there, it's denuded of all art. It's just not there. There was a very different mind in Lutheranism. And so you have famous Lutherans all through the centuries who were collectors of books, or like Valentin Ernst Lescher dies in 1750, great bishop of Dresden. He's a coin collector. And I've got friends who are coin collectors. And what good are coins? They're magnificent. It's a way to learn history. It's a very fantastic hobby.
What is it about the written word in both these books and in different languages and in translating? What is it about the written word that you enjoy?
I like being surprised. I translated this little volume, Johann Gerhard's Meditations on Divine Mercy. And the real name is The Daily Exercise of Piety. But Johann Gerhard, a great 17th century Lutheran theologian, CPH is publishing his whole Dogmatics series, which is a giant set of books, greatest ever written, what the Bible teaches. But just to turn a phrase, like one little chapter begins, Cruce Christi nostra corona est. The cross of Christ is our crown. You can never forget that.
It's beautiful.
And I think just knowing that those gems are there somewhere, and really nobody has seen them or paid any attention to them for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden to have something like that jump out, it just grabs you by the neck, and you just want to jump up and down and say, wow, and to be able to share that excitement. The cross of Christ is our crown, and not being without illness or living a life of free and easy of any cares, no anxiety. No, our crown is following Jesus in suffering, and by suffering he makes us the Christians we are to be and causes us to grab hold of him. That's magnificent.
Amen. Amen. We are in our final episode of the Happy Hobbies series with Pastor Harrison, talking old books and translating. We have more to talk about on the coffee hour. We'll continue that conversation here in just a moment. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
I'm Matt Harrison. At least I thought I was.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We are continuing the Happy Hobbies series. Well, we're wrapping up the Happy Hobbies series today with President Matthew Harrison, President of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, talking about old books, translating, getting lost in an old book is what I'm hearing, finding things that surprise you and just getting lost. What's your place to go to? Where's your favorite place to sit down with an old book, read, translate, and just be immersed in it?
Usually at my desk. Has to be at a desk. And so if I'm translating, I will put the book in front of my laptop computer and stretch a little bit. Then usually have a dictionary or two around the sides. And of course, you have helps online now for translation that are sometimes pretty good, but that's the way it's set up.
Who has been influential in in learning how to translate and learning how to translate better? Is there an art to this that you've learned from other people?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a professional by any means. I'm certainly not. My language skills are not to that level. But I say a bludger. I'm just a hacker who is persistent. And in doing the German work, I also did a lot, along with some friends, for at home in the house of my father. There's about, I don't know, 600-700 pages of documents from the first 5 presidents, German-born presidents of the Missouri Synod. It's very fascinating. Shows that the challenges that we face are typical and not, in many ways, they are not different from the radical struggles of those in the past. As I would translate things, particularly as a young pastor, I would share them with my buddies who shared also an excitement. And those buddies ended up becoming significant players in various publishing endeavors, themselves seeking out translators, sharing works with each other, finding ways to publish. And one of the great things, one of those early friends was a neighboring pastor named Paul T. McCain. So I would translate my Zasa essays and fire them off to him. And he just kept saying more. And then translating is like preaching or anything you do. The more you do it, the better you get at it, at having a feeling of what the author is intending to say. And part of the challenge and also part of the joy is that some things are just horrendously difficult to translate into another language. Mm-hmm. But so I always like to stay close to the text, but really make it speak English in a flowing way. And I'm more or less successful, but that's the goal.
Ever had any blunders or maybe epic fails? This has been our favorite question in this series so far, is what lessons have you learned from mistakes in this hobby?
Wow. Well, I am quite sure, and those translations that I've published, I've always put a disclaimer in there that I'm sure there are mistakes, and I'm responsible for them. So I have actually, in all these years, really had nobody come forth and say, this is a blunderous, terrible translation, which is kind of the, my nightmare scenario. So that's been fortunate. Of course, when you have people reading behind you, you can kind of avoid that. That also might mean that nobody's actually read what I did. So that's always a possibility.
How has this hobby of translating and of this love of old books been helpful or useful in your other vocations?
Well, it's totally intertwined. I am a pastor above all, preaching this way at this Sunday and ministering the sacrament at Village Lutheran Church in St. Louis, by the way, where I'm assistant pastor, and I get to preach on occasion. But it's all about coming to it's all about, for me personally, coming to a more profound, ever more profound understanding of the blessed gospel, of the free forgiveness of Christ, and a constant, unceasing quest for my own soul, for consolation, and to be able to, in a better way, share that consolation with other souls. And so that is, I think, nobody's ever asked that question. That's the driving force, I think. That's what I find.
What insights would you share with someone who wants to take up this hobby or is interested, maybe maybe starting to pick up some old books here and there as well, some great theological content, and look at translating it. What insights do you have for them in starting that?
Yeah, be careful, because books are like mice; they multiply exponentially.
It's true.
And especially when pastors pass away, and all of a sudden a ton comes. And I've been much more discerning as of late. But on the translating piece, I would urge, if you're interested in doing this, and I'm sure there are just a handful of people who do this really, but a lot of people have taken some German, a lot of people have taken some Latin, and make sure you do so, and then find an easy piece. I can recommend things, or others can. Find some. There's innumerable things available on the internet, digitally available. There's a website called Post-Reformation Digital Theology, I think, PRDT, and it's got it's German, it's got thousands and thousands of Lutheran theological literature and other things from centuries back on the web. Start with something easy. Start with C.F.W. Walther if you want to do German, and just start pecking away at it and keep at it. The more you do it, the better you get.
Do you know how many old books you have by chance?
I really don't know, and I don't know if I would disclose that if I did.
Fair enough.
I have, the advantage of looking for old Lutheran Latin stuff, and mostly Lutheran and Lutheran German stuff, is there are very few people that read it or have access to it at all or interested in it. So when things come available, they're often free or very little cost. Now there's a whole lot of old German Bibles and those kind of things from the 19th century, and those are so numerous that they're virtually, then 99% of the time they're great, but they're not worth anything.
Do you have a lot of these books in your office here in the International Center? Do you have a favorite section of books, or books that you go back to frequently in your collection?
Well, yeah, I have a large selection of Luther's writings and different editions of Luther's writings, which are terrific. I have acquired the Weimar edition, the critical edition of Luther, which is about 100 volumes, 100 quarto, really fairly large volumes. So that's a constant resource to check translations or find documents that have you need references on or study. So that's a wonderful section. And then there's just a lot of old Lutheran vellum that's just pigskin, which is nearly indestructible. It's incredible.
Really?
And a lot of times in the 19th century they would produce books that have acid in the paper, but the books in the 18th century, for instance, sometimes in the 19th century you pick up a book and you fold the paper like that, it just cracks. Mm-hmm. But ironically, these books, for instance, this Luther volume for the 16th century, this paper is in part linen, I believe, but you see that it's hardly yellowed, and there's no broken pages whatsoever. It's unbelievably durable.
That's fascinating.
You just think,
wow.
Yeah, that volume here this volume has been in pastors' studies since 1555.
Wow. That's in great shape for being
1555.
That's pretty impressive.
And it's nice. You got a little bookworm who chewed through just a couple of pages before he was caught. But that's where the word bookworm comes from, of course. And you often see these riddled with, and sometimes they're
Swiss
so
cheese,
badly eaten you can't. They're really worthless.
Hungry caterpillar. With just about a minute left, what has been the hardest or the most challenging to translate for you?
Well, there have been a lot of things. I think most everything I've done.
Is that what you like about it? That it's challenging?
Yeah, that is a pleasure. But sometimes it's just so hard that my skills are not adequate to do it. So if it's technical, some kind of technical exegetical thing or some kind of highly technical Latin, for instance. Luther's Latin is generally, in his lectures, is quite manageable. I think the most difficult, but also the most rewarding, was translating most of a volume of essays by Hermann Sasse in the period from the Great Church Struggle against the Nazis in the early 30s. Actually, before that, but translating essays from Sasse from the early 30s through the war. And part of the challenge was trying to learn the context he was responding to, the words he was using, and what the reference were. So it really required, over time, a lot of study of the period to try to bring the documents to life for another generation. And though that volume, The Lonely Way, Volume 1, The Lonely Way, Volume 2 by Sasse is more post-war issues that I think most Lutherans are more interested in, but I actually find the essays prior to World War II and rejection, Sasse's clear, ringing rejection of the Nazis, quite to his own detriment and endangerment. I find those essays most rigorous and enjoyable.
Wrapping up the Happy Hobbies series, Pastor Matthew Harrison, President, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Pastor Harrison, thanks so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour.
Yeah, if I had my banjo here, I'd end with shave and a haircut, 2 bits.
I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.